Hello, Exorcist Files listeners. We have a very, very special episode for you today. Today, things are about to get a little nefarious. I have Chuck Konzelman and Carrie Solomon, the two writers, creators, and just propagators of an incredible film that Father Martin says our listeners know, considers the most accurate depiction of the demonic mind ever created. And they are here today, virtually with us. Where two or more exorcistic filmmakers are gathered, there is an awesome conversation. Chuck, Carrie, thank you for joining us on The Exorcist Files.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. I never knew I was a propagator, but I'll go with it.
Well, you are, and so I think in the interest of that, this is the icebreaker we ask everybody: is if you had to, is there even words that could sum up the impact The Exorcist Files has had on you? I mean, should it be canonized? I mean, what are your thoughts on The Exorcist Files podcast?
Well, we don't want the typical rules for canonization are a holy death, and we don't want to see it go anywhere. So let's have you in contention and everyone optimistic, but let's not finish that particular part of the job.
Yeah, let's let it run for a couple more years.
Yeah. Die in the order of sanctity 100 years from now, and then we'll canonize it.
Okay. All right. Well, good. So maybe we'll settle for deuterocanonical, perhaps, right? Maybe we can get in a later accretion. We'll get in there.
There you go.
But no, folks, both Carrie and Chuck have been huge supporters of our podcast and Father, and so we owe them an immense debt as well. So I wanted to have them on because Father has shared a little bit, and we're going to hear from their perspective too, some of the absolutely astounding things that accompanied making this movie. And it is interesting because we've talked about other movies and how this topic seems to attract a lot of bizarre activity. So, Carrie, Chuck, I would love to, let's just get right into it and get in, since we are a spiritual warfare podcast. Your movie seems to be, from an outside observation, to be opposed. Would you agree?
Yes, I would say most certainly so. We have the things which are unusual but can be explained in the natural, and then we have the things which are completely inexplicable from the natural.
When we wrote it, we knew the spirit dropped on us multiple times, so we knew something was up. It's almost impossible to do a movie about two guys in a room, because how do you make it interesting? And yet the spirit dropped on us. We felt these compelling moments that just appeared out of nowhere. And then when we directed it, I mean, things went crazy haywire. Every text message wouldn't go through. Every email couldn't be sent. The cell phones didn't work. I wouldn't be surprised if for some reason, we lose the video here today or whatever. We pray that won't happen. But it was a constant thing all the time. I mean, everything that occurred. We had, for example, 12 car crashes in 13 days. Now, we were told before we started from the Lord that he would protect us and the crew and everything to go forward. Because when you dance, when you take on the devil, you find out whether there is a devil. And so the bottom line is, and I can assure all your listeners, there is a devil. I mean, we saw him tangibly. We saw a multitude of things. But we had 12 car crashes, just like one every day. Every car was totaled. So these were catastrophic crashes. And yet, every single person in the car, not a scratch.
Now, these were crew members, or these are all members? These are all people who are somehow associated with the film.
Absolutely.
Producers, right. Crew members, everybody. We only had 2.5 weeks of active shooting. It was a relatively short shoot. And so one Sunday night, we had an exorcist-trained priest staying with us. He was a Claretian, and he stayed with us in an Airbnb. Directors tend to stay in a house when you're shooting, because if they put you in a hotel, you can't go to the ice machine without having 12 conversations. So you hide in your room, you never come out. So we're in a house. We're sharing a house. And Carrie's son was there with us staying, and the priest is there. And because you're off schedule shooting a movie, he's saying mass in our living room at 10:30 at night on a Sunday. By 2 a.m., he was having an emergency appendectomy. His appendix burst during removal. And the surgeon said, if you'd gotten here an hour later, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it's just crazy stuff like that. I'll let Carrie tell you the story of the satanic squirrel, which is laughable at this point, but just an idea of, I'll set the stage. So on this day when this happens, we were actually shooting the scenes where the mechanics of kind of demonic possession and so forth were being discussed on set. We were in a massive basketball arena. It's where the Oklahoma Thunder used to play, a convention center. It's a 1.25 million square foot facility, so it was just enormous. We had what we were told was the highest sustained winds in the history of the state of Oklahoma that day. So the building was groaning like it was in agony. We had the support beams of the dome, a 12,000 seat arena, and they were groaning. And then we had the kind of the tin work for the HVAC on the roof, and it was tortured metal sound, like it was being ripped around. Some of the crew who were not believers, they said it's like we're in hell. And it would reach a crescendo while we were discussing and while we were shooting. And most of the time when you're on set, you're actually not shooting. So if you're shooting maybe 10%, 15% of the time, it's a lot. When the cameras actually weren't running, the winds would tend to die down significantly. And then when we were shooting again, it would rev back up. But as an example of the Lord taking what was meant for ill and using it for good, when we finally went to sound, because we were afraid we were going to have to re-record everything, which is really tough for actors because they have to match their lip movements. It also tends to mute. You never get back to the original magic of the original performance. So it would have negatively impacted the film overall. Our sound guy, who is an expert, what we'd kind of forgotten was the conceit of the film at that point is that there's a thunderstorm raging outside, and all of these low sounds that are coming through and leaking through actually function as though they were sound designed for the movie, and they actually enhance the experience. But I'm sure somebody out there wasn't looking to make our life easy.
But I think the best part of this, and for your listeners, is that when we were shooting about the demonic, about the devil, and so on and so forth, I mean, it really sounded like we were in hell, and it was like demonic voices from above us. So much so that the atheists that we had on set looked up and they were like, there's something really wrong here. It feels like we're in hell. Sean Patrick Flannery, who was the lead, basically, everybody was freaked out because basically we'd stop the scene and then we'd go back and do it again and it would come again. But when we would then move the scene to just a generic scene, something that wasn't about the devil, no voices. So we'd go back immediately to do the demonic. Here come the voices again. So it wasn't just the wind sweeping through. Oh, it's a nice coincidence. It was blatantly obvious that every time we spoke about the devil, every time we brought on, something that he didn't want, that we had this. It was like an orchestra from hell above us, and it was abnormal. It was totally abnormal, and this was an everyday event. I mean, we had every single day crazy things, like I said, from accidents.
This arena had been prayed over too. There was 5 pounds of exorcised salt in the arena.
Okay, so in a phrase I never thought I would utter, and a testament to God's plans for your life, I want to come back to something you said, Chuck, that satanic squirrel. That was not on my bingo card. So could you elaborate, before we get into the 5 pounds of salt, could you elaborate on apparently the demons that were sent into a squirrel to afflict the film?
Well, the same night we had the big wind, we came home about midnight to the Airbnb, and we were just kind of like, we were exhausted. We were going to watch a half-hour TV or something, and it was pretty dark in the house, and Carrie's son was staying with us because it was just before Christmas. He'd come out to visit, and Carrie's son said, "Daddy, somebody broke in the house," and I am going to let Mr. Solomon take it from there.
So we had the fireplace. There was a fireplace to the right. So if I'm looking straight at the TV on the right, there's a fireplace. And my boy, I brought him out from Los Angeles at the time to set in Oklahoma because I wanted to spend Christmas with him and have him on a movie set and so on and so forth. So I went overboard. I tend to do that, especially at Christmas. So I had Christmas trees and I had, Rudolph and Frosty the Snowman and the tall soldiers, but I also had the baby Jesus and the nativity and all of that. And so what happened was, underneath all of that was two doors that, you know, how you shut the glass doors on the fireplace. Well, the day before, those were sealed shut. And I noticed that they were totally open, wide open now. And I'm looking around and the place is trashed. I was on the couch. I didn't even notice this. That's how tired we were. So I go over and I'm like, oh man, I can't believe this. But what I noticed was the Christmas tree, the ornaments, Rudolph, Frosty, totally fine. But every religious item was destroyed. And it was like the baby Jesus, the creche, the anything that was truly holy. And then we saw this. It was hard to explain, but it looked like excrement on the floor, and it led to the couch. And all of a sudden, I realized that something came down the chimney because we followed the tracks, jumped on the couch. Now, this wasn't funny at the time, but when I tell the story later, people start laughing. And so now we can laugh at it, but it was crazy. And
it wasn't Santa, right? Just to be clear, it was not Santa that came down.
No, there was nothing like that. And so what happened?
What he's about to prove you, what he's about to tell you, will prove it wasn't Santa. Yes,
right. And so on the couch, we see that whatever it was, jumped onto the couch. And then we had mass. There was a table that Father used, and they had the paten and all the holy items.
Altar cloth. All of his utensils were on the table.
So what happened was the squirrel climbs up on the couch. Now you got to remember, there's food everywhere in a movie set, and they try to keep us happy. They lay out food everywhere. There's food
our house.
Everywhere.
It was full of snacks. It was full of snacks.
I mean, everywhere, right? So there's food that the squirrel could have. Nothing. It goes up on the couch, jumps to the table, goes to the restroom, literally on the table, the top right corner and the bottom left corner. It pees on both corners, and then on the paten, which is the golden plate where the body of Christ is put, it craps on the paten. Now, then it goes off of there, comes back around and up out of the chimney with all this food in the house. The irony of this was about 6 months after this happened, no one believed us. About 6 months after this happened, there was a guy who we met who was a satanic worshiper. I mean, this guy was really
at one time, yeah.
At one time, but he had become this phenomenally on fire Christian. And we were having a conversation. I told him this story, and he says, why don't you believe that? And this guy goes and tells me how satanic worshipers take creatures like cats, dogs, squirrels, all this, and they curse them and they have them infested and they send them into people's houses to wreak havoc. I mean, it was a trip. So literally, he says, what you're dealing with, that was the devil. He used that. I mean, down the chimney, desecrates everything, destroys everything that was on the shelves and so on. Piece by piece, all the religious items broken, then just leaves. It was crazy. We realized at that moment, this is another step that we were shocked by it.
So I'm going to assume this is a crazy story. I'm going to assume that both of you now have optioned the rights to this and to either feature Squirrel Interrupted, a new movie, or Children of the Acorns, right? Are those both horror thrillers coming from Carrie and Chuck soon?
They are now.
Oh my gosh. So I had heard about this story. Now we're going to get to premiere night as well, because you guys were not off the hook just yet, not even close. And actually your car accident story, I remember because a mutual dear friend of ours also had his car hit. And I was just remember thinking, oh, that's terrible. And then he said, oh yeah, a lot of the crew members had this. And so this is just wild. But I guess let me just get your reaction to this, because on one hand, as Christians, there should be no surprise, right? Jesus said, look, you will face many trials in this life. So no surprise, right? If you're doing something for the kingdom, it is opposed, etc. However, we do hear about in movies like this, etc., you know, with the original Exorcist and all the things that happened on that set. You hear about Scott Derrickson and some of the stuff that happened on the Exorcism of Emily Rose and some of the weird phenomena that we're having there. But I guess what I'm asking is, how do you reconcile this, like this victory, you know, this kind of like authority that the scriptures, you know, speak pretty clearly of resist the devil, flee from you, and yet all this tragedy, and you guys were prayed up, you know, you had all these sort of built-in protections that these other movies didn't have, I think. and yet you still experienced, this, crazy squirreliness. So how do you kind of think through the persecution you all felt on this movie?
Well, I think that's exactly it. It was persecution, but he did, obviously his displeasure, us revealing his machinations, all the things that the devil does. But if you look at it, 12 car crashes, right? The devil uses fear and confusion. That's his tools. So he scares us to quit, right? That's what he wants us to do. But we had 12 car crashes in 13 days. Not a person was scratched. So what does this show? The devil attacks, the Lord defends, and then uses that evil for good. Now we're talking about it, right? And people out of your audience are going to start saying, this stuff is real. Well, that saves people to change their lives, to not play with tarot cards and so on. There's a purpose for every single thing that the Lord does. So he allows us to see the presence of evil, but he frustrates that evil. He allows us to build our faith through facing evil. I myself have seen a demon in real life. And this is not, and I wondered, and it scared me beyond everything I had ever. I mean, I was messed up for 2 weeks. But at the end of 2 weeks, what happened was I suddenly realized, this is when I was younger, I suddenly realized this was a phenomenal gift from God. Because once I saw the demon, I knew there were angels and there were more demons. And if there are demons, that means there's a devil. And if there are angels, what does that mean? There is a God. It actually turned around, strengthened me for the future of doing something like Unplanned, where we were also demonically assaulted, and doing Nefarious and everything else we do. So there is reason for everything that the Lord allows and does. But on the other hand, the devil, he doesn't have the capacity to foresee like the Lord does. So the devil is always attacking, trying to scare. The demons were there. No one ever got hurt. We had people cursing the set. We had people doing we all of a sudden walked in one day and there was this not incense, but what was the smell, Chuck? What was that? Indian?
It was actually the person running the facility burned sage. We had one of the odd but not necessarily supernatural things that happened was the trade union IATSE, which controls a lot of the people that work on set. They struck us without warning and without a strike vote, which is just completely unfair. And then they lied to the federal government. They said we fired our whole crew, and they tried to bring down the weight of Joe Biden's National Labor Relations Board on us. So I had days literally where I had to work with lawyers to keep us shooting as opposed to being able to co-direct the film. So they were trying to shut us down very hard. While that was going on, this woman burned sage. Our exorcist trained priest noticed that the smell of the sage stopped outside, and even though it was burned indoors, it seemed as though there was a barrier and it never came near the actual shooting area of the set itself. And he actually spoke with some other exorcists, and he said, is this normal? Like, yeah, he believes that the Lord was preventing that sort of pagan superstition or whatever you want to call, the effects of that from permeating the set itself.
But don't forget, we also had in the room Father Martins, who came to the set. We were honored to have him. Now, here's a guy who, if you know him, he's big. He's a great guy. He's fun, and we're breaking bread at lunch. 4 hours later, I get a phone call from upstairs in the suite. I mean, if this doesn't do it for somebody, you're not going to believe anything if you don't believe this. So we're spending wonderful time with Father at lunch, and then we got to get back to work and stuff because we're doing the premiere that night. So we're running all the talent through interviews, and the media comes in and interviews. So we're in a big suite up in the room. I get a phone call from my girl that's shooting my team, and she says, "We got a problem in the suite." And I'm like, "What's the problem?" And she's like, "There are demonic voices coming out of the couch." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" Now, normally it's, we ran out of toilet paper. Craft services didn't show up. This is a first. There were demonic voices coming out of the couch. Literally, there were demonic voices coming out of the couch. The cameras were all messed up. They would freeze, the sound mixer, and the lights were flashing on and off. Cut to, I called Father up and I said, "We got a problem." And I told him really quickly, and what does he say? He says, I'll be right there. But with a voice of like very different, not the jovial fun. Now all of a sudden it's like, okay, I know what this is. Cut to, he's at the door, different person. Because what he's coming to fight the devil. And literally he goes in there, does ancient prayer, in Latin,
He brings a
exercise.
16th century right in Latin, and he's got, okay, this was a movie shot because the interview suite is dark. The next room's got light, so he's backlit, which is great. He's in his black cleric's purple stole. He's got the Benedictine crucifix in one hand, and he's got the Latin rite tucked under the arm in the other. So here he comes. He's ready for war. So he comes into the suite where this has been going on. It's on the 5th floor. He puts his back to the French doors to the balcony. The balcony is only the size of a postage stamp out there, but he's got his back to it. So he goes, performs the rite, and then afterwards we talk to him. And he says, yeah, while I was going through the rite, behind my right ear, there was a female voice chanting diabolically. He says, I wasn't sure of the language, but I got to the part of the rite where I declare, bow now before the holy and terrible name of Jesus. And he's like, yeah, she was out of here after that. And we rest of the rest.
So you're watching the hammer hit the nail. And for those people that think Jesus is in a struggle with the devil, they're totally wrong. I mean, it's heresy. Yeah. God is so sovereign, so powerful that when he appears through the priest with the exorcism, everything is destroyed. Everything is blown out of the room and never to return. Then we find out that women downstairs in the premiere are being thrown face down.
2 of them in the lobby. We then threw Father into an SUV and took him where we expected him to be doing an exorcism for Right of Place, which was our theater, the flagship theater of one of the big 3 chains here in Texas. And in the half hour before he got there, 2 women in separate incidents on a completely flat floor had been thrown face down in the lobby. And so we were like, okay, that's a little weird. And then just to cap some other stuff off, so the next day, our booking agent, who places the films in the theaters, one of the busiest weeks of his life and the most important as far as the film is concerned. He's only in his 30s. He has a short hop flight from Dallas to Phoenix. His eardrum bursts during the flight from the pressure change. I've never known anyone who had their eardrum burst, but his does. And then just in case we want any more of the weirdness, during the marketing campaign in LA, there was a torrential downpour for a whole weekend. But in Burbank, where we were doing our post-production, the entire roof of the building got ripped off. And it rained. This happened about 2 or 3 in the morning, as best anyone can tell, on a Saturday morning. So no one was there. Torrential rain. We're talking like what they call an atmospheric river, which is kind of like a nonstop hurricane force, rain. For 10 or 12 hours, every inch of drywall, every inch of carpet had to be torn out of the building. Our office that we worked out of, when they tore out the walls, there was a window, formerly a window and a door in that office that we never knew about. We only saw it when they tore it down to sticks. And our entire marketing team had to work dispersed for the rest of the marketing campaign for the film. Now, there were only 2 things going on in that building at the time that this occurred. And it was the only building in Burbank it happened to. As far as I'm aware, it's the only building in Los Angeles that it happened to. The only 2 things going on in that building at the time were our marketing campaign and post-production for The Chosen.
So the scripture says, a righteous person hath regard for their beast. Well, my beast is actually an adorable 160-pound St. Bernard named Emmy, and my dog loves to eat, which is why I'm so stoked to have her eating Ollie. Ollie is clean, fresh nutrition for your dog. One day, I looked at her bowl and thought, just what is kibble? I know my dog doesn't need to eat at a Michelin star restaurant, but I thought, hey, what should a dog eat? And I'm guessing not whatever is in that bowl. Dogs, like humans, can have their health and well-being dramatically impacted by what they eat. And as anyone who has a dog knows, your dog is family. So why not feed it like family? It's easy to get started. Just fill out Ollie's 30-second quiz, and they'll create a customized meal plan based on your pup's weight, activity level, and other health info. They'll send you out a starter box, and for any first-timers, Ollie will send out your pup's first box with 2 weeks worth of meals and a guide of how to gradually switch them over to their new diet. Ollie offers 3 meal plans to choose from, so you can choose between a full fresh plan, fresh topper plan, or a mixed plan with their freshly baked recipes for your special fur baby. Right now, Ollie is offering a fantastic deal to let your pup taste test a personalized meal plan. So head on to ollie.com, tell them all about your dog, use our code XFiles, and you'll get 60% off your first box of meals when you subscribe today. Head to OLLIE.com and enter code XFiles. That's EXFiles to get 60% off your first box. They offer a clean bowl guarantee on their first box. So if you're not completely satisfied, you can get your money back. Wow. Well, I'm grateful IKEA is not a sponsor for this, given the demonic couches. And I'm also, I know you two are recruiting people and building out, which we'll get to your business you're building out, but I have to say, your HR video for orientation should come with several lengthy waivers or disclaimers, apparently. So if you're thinking about working with Chuck and Carrie, folks, you're getting all the info you need right now, right?
Well, I've always said, the Catholic marketing campaign is "Come Die With Us," so maybe we can hire that outfit to get.
Wow,
really sexy marketing campaign. Come die with us. I don't know what ours will be, but somebody needs to work on it.
Wow, this is incredible. No, we heard from Father Martins about that night, and I do imagine him sort of as a Liam Neeson figure from Taken, where he gets the phone call, and he does have a very particular set of skills that makes him a nightmare for the enemy. But he said he definitely felt, and he would know, he said he felt something quite sinister in that room. And I think it's interesting, I've now interviewed and, being the sort of trying to be the journalist on the show here and interview all these different people for perspectives. I have interviewed now so many exorcists, and it's a tight-knit community. They all know each other, but it is a common thing. They say that just recording equipment just stops working sometimes. And so there is an interesting theory out there that, and you can call them demons, you can call them immaterial spirit, whatever you want to call it. But even among some of my secular interviews I've done, that there's this acknowledgement that sometimes when you document this stuff, equipment, somehow this EMF stuff can be manipulated, and somehow the electrical fields can be tampered with. And so it sounds like that's been your experience.
Absolutely the case. We had to take our Newsweek interview, had to get taken 3 times. So it got taken, and this is 3,000 miles away. So the first time, the journalist calls back embarrassed. He's like, my batteries must have failed. First time it's ever happened. Okay. So we do the interview again, and he knows he's got it recorded, and his digital recorder fails, and all the information evaporates. So finally he says, okay, how about I send you the questions in writing and you respond? And so I did, we did. And then I tried sending the email. Carrie was working at a desk across the belly of a conference table from me. His Wi-Fi is working great. It took me 20 minutes to send an email. And just as I remember from many years ago, John Debney, the composer of The Passion of the Christ, had such problems with his recording equipment when he was composing the score for that film, and was not expecting it. He literally, and I don't advise anyone doing this. Unfortunately, it didn't work for him. Apparently, he went out in the middle of the night into the parking lot of where he was working and challenged the devil to a fist fight. Nobody showed up. It's a gift for him, but he was just so frustrated at the problems that were manifesting. So yeah, I think let's face it, it's just energy. Messing with energy for a spiritual being is probably child's play.
Not only that, we were on the way out to Texas. We were in LA at the time. We were going to bring out equipment and stuff. So we wanted to go to, I'll take a step back. The final, we went to Deluxe, which does the final polish and everything, and you run it on a big screen. Deluxe in LA is the size of a city block. It's a monster.
It's $100 million complex easily. It's a city unto itself.
It's bulletproof. Literally backup generator after the whole thing. And so we go into Deluxe, and we're just about to do to run the movie to make sure everything is fine.
Final quality control.
Right. Whole building goes out. All the lights. Backup generators come on. They go out. Everything. The guy looks at us and says to us, this is unusual because this can't happen. We leave there. We hop in the car because we've got to be out in Texas. And as we go, I said, hey, Chuck, I forgot. pull over to the Office Depot over here. I want a pad so we can write some notes on the way, for, Nefarious, the TV show, that kind of thing. So we pull over to the Office Depot. This is in another place completely, a couple of hours from where we were, okay? Go to the front door. The manager won't let us in. Why not? He says about 30 seconds ago, all the lights went out. All of our electricity went out. So we couldn't. He denied us a pen and paper, okay, to write ideas down. People don't understand. It's a constant thing. And after a while, you get crazy, frustrated, and angry, and you just want to quit, which is exactly the point.
I do, and I'm a pen and paper guy, but I did want to let you know, Carrie, you do have a voice memo app and you can take notes on your phone should you ever face diabolical resistance at the Office Depot or Staples, depending on wherever you procure your items.
Young Jedi, we are born in another age. You're still in that age. You got to remember, we thought the 80s were cool. Okay, so the bottom line is,
we thought the Codex was a civilization advance. Once we got out of papyrus and into things that look more or less like books, that's as far as we advanced.
Well, as long as I know you're not writing Nefarious, the TV show, on parchment and scrolls, but I think it's still going to be fantastic. As we wrap up here, I want to get a little bit too about what was your heart in wanting to write the movie, et cetera? Because again, I've now interviewed a bunch of extras, and it's widely accepted. Multiple of these priests have said on our show and others that they consider your film to be the most accurate depiction of the demonic mind, and accurately capturing the psychological gaslighting and sort of the personality. So what was kind of the genesis of the film, and how did it it's a miracle it got done. And the part you guys are not mentioning, and any producer, director knows this, it's a miracle when any film gets done, period. The fact that you did it in the face of such significant opposition, there should be a category for the Oscars for the nominees for most opposed film or best film featuring spiritual opposition. And you guys would be a shoo-in. But what was the heart for wanting to do this, and walk us through the project?
We did not want to do it. Steve Dace called us up, and basically he had helped us in Unplanned. He was one of the few people with Glenn. Glenn Beck was the first big entity that stood up for us, and it gave us a little momentum. We were under terrible siege. The government, Google, everybody was trying to kill us, take us out. In other words, stop the movie, Unplanned. And so we remembered Steve because of that. He calls us up one day and he says to us, how much would it cost for you to do my book? And it's a Nefarious plot, which is basically only a diatribe. It's a devil ranting about how he destroyed America, is going to destroy America. And we're like, I don't know, and we didn't want to give him a number, but he stayed on us, persistent. And finally, I just threw a number at him and I said, I don't know, $2 million. Well, the next day we had $2 million. And I was like, now we're going to have to probably do this, and stuff like that. We just weren't there at that moment. We were finishing up some other stuff and we had some plans. Next thing we know, we're trying to fight it, but the Lord keeps bringing us back to it. Ultimately, we said, okay, Lord, we hear you. We're going to do it. But I will tell you that movie was not done by us. I know people think I'm being trite. I'm telling you, that movie was not done by the Spirit came into us and wrote that. Look, we're two guys from New Jersey and Brooklyn, okay? We don't speak like that character speaks. We don't write like that. That dialogue was God. It was the Holy Spirit, like the scene where all hell rejoices. I don't know if you remember the scene after the abortion sequence. When that came right from above, it came out of my mouth. And literally, Chuck and I just hit the floor. We couldn't believe it. And the same thing on set. Every single thing. This was a battle between good and evil. This is between God and the devil. And I think the thing that so blew us away about the movie was when we watched it the first time, it was like we didn't write it. It was crazy. It was like we were watching a movie like if we went to the theater, because literally we had forgot. It was just magnificent. In that way. I don't know. It's a great piece of work, in my opinion, that the Lord did. I will tell you, we get texts, phone messages, emails every day. I'll read this to you. Sean Patrick Flannery literally just sent this to me. He says, there's a letter he got. This movie is affecting people. And by the way, our numbers, which normally go and hit the floor at this point, are actually now coming back up and rising. People are going in waves. We're growing as a movie a year after the movie. But this is a letter to give you an example. Hi, Sean. I want to share an update over a year later how Nefarious has just completely changed my life. Atheist to Christian, but not only that, I have joined a ministry through my church that will be entering prisons to give them hope for Jesus. Nefarious still guides me and gives me a different lens to look through when it comes to speaking to these inmates. Meeting some last week was a complete humbling experience, and I can't wait to give them specific lines through this movie that made me change my life. We get dozens of these things. So it's not only the spiritual battle, people are going back to church, they're burning their tarot cards, they're getting rid of their fortune tellers. This is an amazing event in spiritual history. That's all I'm going to say. We are humbled to have been, I don't know, puppets, the hand, the eyes, whatever you want to say. We're humbled that the Lord chooses us, and praise God that we said yes to do it.
Hi, friends. Father Martin's here. Ryan usually does the ad breaks, but for this sponsor, I wanted to tell you about their products personally. Friends and family often ask me if I know where they can find a rosary nicer than a $10 rosary, or a medal that is nicer than a $2 medal. Fount of Grace is a company that makes beautiful Catholic sacramentals from high-quality materials such as gold, silver, and stone. Having owned products made by Fount of Grace, I can attest that their quality is just as excellent. And all of their products come gift-ready in elegant packaging. Visit their website at fountofgrace.com and use our promo code XFiles, that is EX Files, to get $15 off your first order.
Chuck, what about you? How's the movie impacted you? And did you share Carrie's resistance of I didn't want to do this either, and you found yourself along for a wild ride?
Well, yes. Yes to all of the above.
Okay.
I have sometimes compared being Mr. Solomon's business partner to being terrified of roller coasters, and suddenly you wake up and you find yourself on a roller coaster and the guy next to you is laughing maniacally, and then eventually the ride is slowing down. It's coming back into the station. You figure it's over and you realize you're being waved back through. So for another go round. So, but we decided, we both decided if we're going to do something. It just seemed like the right thing to do. When the financing came out of nowhere, I said, look, I feel like a golden retriever who spent his life chasing fire trucks. Now I caught one. I got to figure out what to do with it. We got $2 million. I got to go figure out how to make a movie with it. Well, how about we take, and we needed a storytelling device because the original book, it was loosely based on, didn't even have a second character to talk to. So we kind of started thinking about the condemned prisoner. And for those who are or aren't familiar with the story, it's about a condemned prisoner who's possessed by a demon and a psychiatrist who comes to interview him to determine his fitness for execution. Because if you're actually legitimately insane, they won't execute you. So, and they have a little chat for a couple hours. So it was a very, very interesting experience. It was also COVID, right? It was very, very oppressive, the writing of it. We actually had to take a break for a few weeks, which we've only ever had to do once before in a 30-year career. And that was with similarly dark material. There was a concentration camp story that we were working on at one point. We had to take a few weeks away from it. This, we had to do the same thing. We worked on a comedy pilot for a couple of weeks and then came back to it. But the funny thing was, when it was completely done, Carrie may feel differently. I had no idea whether it was any good at all. We went to go show it to a few people, and if everyone who had looked at it had told me it was terrible and was unfilmable, because it was so different than anything else, it's not a normal story. It breaks all sorts of rules, all sorts of conventions, and theoretically it shouldn't work. But for some reason, there is some anointing in this film that I don't even quite understand. I won't claim to understand it, but the Spirit is using it. There's a military chaplain who's using it for his troops. A person who worked on the film went home to Colorado. She called Carrie, who she knew, said, yeah, I was online for confession, and there's a priest, a friend of mine walked out and knew I'd worked on the film and said, "Do you know what I got for my penance?" She said, "No." He said, "The priest told me to go watch the movie Nefarious."
Ah,
So it's just this weird. I can't. We got to. It's apparently now opening in South America. We got word of. Carrie got word of at a conference. A guy who said he's had an atheist friend for 50 years in Venezuela, and the guy called him up and he said, "I saw this movie Nefarious, and I'm going back to see it again." And now he's a spiritual seeker. Steve Dace got a call from a father who was so happy. He said, "I have a son." I'd never heard this before. He has a son who's autistic, I guess, but has a thing called Einstein syndrome. He's super brilliant. And he said basically the son's in his 20s, I believe, early 20s. And he said he's been railing against the concept of a God for as long as he's been old enough to voice the opinion. And they watched the movie together as father and son, just to watch a movie. And the son looked at his father and said, it kind of answers a lot of questions as to why things in the world are the way they are, doesn't it? And the father recognized in his son, he broke down crying. He said, I couldn't do this. All these years, I couldn't do this. And yet now my son is asking the questions of a seeker. So the movie has got some kind of a power that in its creation, especially at the scripting stage, we never understood. And this was why the devil, we've talked about all of the things that went wrong, but there were also all of the things that went right. We were the first film ever given permission to film inside the wire at a working prison. And the warden, when we went to initially ask and scout, he said, "Well, it'll never happen. The Board of Prisons will never allow it, but if they do, I'll let you." So, and they let us work for 3 days inside the wire at a working prison, a prison that at one time, not very many years ago, was the most violent prison in the United States in terms of the murder rate. It's in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, a town of 1,700, half of whom are incarcerated. So it was just crazy. Behind us, there's a scene where the psychiatrist is out in the prison yard talking to the warden, and they're just sharing a cigarette, and the psychiatrist is kind of shaken. And our video village is what they call it, where the directors are watching the monitors. We were about 50 feet away, 75 feet away. 10 feet behind us through an 18-inch glass window was a guy who'd killed and eaten a number of murder victims of his. So it was a place of such immense evil on one level. But we were allowed access. We were totally protected when we were there. We had so many things go right for us as well. And I want to give credit to the Lord for all the ways that he allowed us. He allowed us to go theatrical. And again, even there, the opposition was so strange. We found a date in the release schedule of movies that had a hole in it. It was a pretty obvious hole, but we went there. 6 films moved their dates to come land on us. 2 of them were horror films. One was The Pope's Exorcist. Moved its release date six months to land on our date exactly. And the movie chain said, "We've never seen this before. In our whole careers, it's like a game of chicken and no one is backing out. We've never seen this happen." So it was that the blessing, the opposition, the blessing, the opposition, the blessing, the opposition. Yes, our booking agent burst his eardrum on the way home, but he still manages to get us in 1,500 plus screens. Yes, our producer is tucking his child into a car seat and the door he's leaning against in the street gets ripped off at 45 miles an hour and his car gets totaled, but he doesn't have a scratch, and neither does his child or the rest of the family.
I just want to say thank you to you for having us. We love your show, and I want to say thank you to Carlos Martin. Chuck and I want to say that Father Carlos was amazing. He did so many things for us. I mean, I go to sleep at night knowing that there are men like him taking on the darkness while I'm sleeping, and yeah, and I just think, these guys are the real superheroes. I mean, we go to the movies to watch these silly superheroes like Batman or whatever. And in reality, this battle is being waged by guys like Father Carlos. I mean, I just think it's heroic on every level, and especially because they become a target. And I just want to say to the viewers or the listeners that are listening, if anything, we, from the bottom of our heart, Chuck and I just want you to know there is evil. and there is good. And good is more powerful than evil. It doesn't seem that way because evil controls the media and they control what you hear and think. And they want you to think that they outnumber us. They don't outnumber the good. But what they do is they try to suffocate our hope. And you have to realize that there is a devil. We've seen the devil. We see him in almost everything we've done. And I will tell you, God is the king. And the devil is literally insignificant in comparison to Jesus and insignificant to God overall. And if God so wills something, there is nothing. If he ordains something, it's going to happen. There's nothing the devil can do other than to fear and confuse. But when he gets you to play with him or to dance with him, that's when you get yourself in trouble. So throw out your tarot cards, don't go to your fortune tellers, stop playing with Reiki and yoga and all these things. These things are designed. The whole world is designed to corrupt you and lead you to the demonic. And what I would say is that just love Jesus and he'll love you. He'll love you whether you love him or not. But if you love him, your life will radically change. It will just say, Jesus, I surrender. I'm going to try and love you. Help me to love you more. But thank you too, Ryan, because I think out of all the people we've met, I can honestly say I think you're the most competent. I love your show. We love everything. And we've told you already how we feel about you, but I think you're doing good work here.
Well, thank you. I'm going to put most of that on a Hallmark card. I think we could all launch the Nefarious Queen. But thank you all. And I will end with a quote from the now cinema canonical piece of Nefarious, which is, I didn't know that we were in a battle or a war. And of course, the response is, and that is why, friends, you're losing. So one of the epic lines oft quoted by many of our exorcists. So thank you so much for joining us, y'all. And we'll look forward to your next project and pray that it goes smoother. So thank you so much, folks, listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Hello? Wow, you're still here. You must really love this show. I will say you have excellent taste in podcasts, which is why, should you be craving a few more dad jokes and some great conversations, you should head on over to the Ryan Bethea Show and check out my interviews with some incredible guests like John O'Hurley, who played Mr. Peterman on Seinfeld, Kathy Lee Gifford, PGA legend Bubba Watson, Ghostbuster Ernie Hudson, best-selling author Andy Weir of The Martian, and many more. About 2 years ago, we bought an airport shuttle bus, turned it into a campfire setting, and actually drove this thing across the country in this fully mobile studio to interview some absolute legends. All those talks are online. We don't just ask them normal questions. We go really deep, and we find key moments in their journey to help figure out their best lessons. All the episodes are evergreen, and they're really fun. So check out the Ryan Bethea Show wherever you get your podcasts.